Have you ever felt a presence, unseen but undeniable, a constant weight against your sanity? A feeling that you are not truly alone, even in the most solitary of spaces? This is my story, a chronicle of a chilling descent into madness brought on by an entity I can only call the Horla. It began subtly a week ago on a crisp autumn morning in Troy, 1987. The air hung heavy with the scent of burning leaves and damp earth. As I sat down to my usual breakfast of strong coffee and stale croissants, I'm a man of routine, a creature of habit. My days are spent meticulously documenting the flora and fauna of the region, my evenings lost in the comforting embrace of leather-bound books and flickering gaslight. This predictability, this order, was my shield against the chaos of the world. But that morning, a disquiet settled upon me. It wasn't a specific thought or worry, but rather a gnawing unease that refused to be ignored. It was as if a shadow had fallen across my life, a shadow devoid of form or substance, yet undeniably present. I brushed it aside, attributing it to the dregs of a restless night's sleep. The days that followed were a blur of unsettling occurrences. Objects would vanish from their usual places, only to reappear hours later in illogical locations. Papers I was certain I'd meticulously arranged would be scattered across my desk, as if by an unseen hand. The silence of my study, once a source of solace, now resonated with a faint, unsettling hum that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. The first truly terrifying incident occurred at night. I awoke with a jolt, a strangled scream trapped in my throat. The air in my room was thick and oppressive, as if something monstrous had passed through moments before. A cold sweat slicked my skin, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand, its warm glow pushing back the encroaching darkness. Yet, even with the room illuminated, the suffocating sense of unseen presence remained. The following days were a descent into paranoia. I began sleeping with the gaslight burning all night, its harsh glare offering a false sense of security. My meals became erratic, my appetite stolen by the constant gnawing fear. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a restless tossing and turning, punctuated by flashes of unseen movement in the corner of my eye. The worst part, the truly terrifying part, was the silence. There were no moans, no groans, no spectral whispers. Just a thick, oppressive quiet that seemed to press down on me, amplifying my fear to a deafening roar. It was a silence filled with a chilling sense of anticipation, as if something was waiting, just out of sight, for the right moment to strike. One evening, as I sat hunched over my desk, lost in a desperate attempt to focus on my work, a book tumbled from the shelf behind me. Startled, I whirled around, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. The room was empty. The only movement, the flickering gaslight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Yet as I reached to pick up the book, a wave of icy dread washed over me. It wasn't the fallen book that sent a shiver down my spine, but the distinct feeling of someone or something standing directly behind me. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to turn and face whatever lurked in the shadows. But a primal terror held me rooted to the spot. The silence in the room seemed to stretch into an eternity, broken only by the ragged rasp of my own breathing. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the feeling vanished. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror, but the room was empty. The book lay innocuously on the floor, its pages undisturbed. Yet the weight of the unseen presence remained, a cold, clammy hand gripping my heart. I don't know how much longer I can take this constant feeling of being watched, stalked by something I can't see, something I can't fight. My grip on reality is slipping, and I fear the darkness that threatens to consume me. The question that plagues me now, the question that chills me to the bone, is this: am I truly alone? Or is there something unseen and horrific sharing my home, my life? The encounter in my study left me a shattered man. Sleep, once a refuge, became a battlefield where I wrestled with unseen horrors. The oppressive silence of my house was broken only by the relentless drumming of my own heartbeat. I felt like a caged animal, constantly on edge, waiting for the unseen predator to pounce. Driven by a desperate need for a witness, for some shred of normalcy, I reached out to my old friend, Dr. Etienne Martin, a renowned physician with a keen interest in the unexplained. Etienne arrived the following afternoon, a man of science with a skeptical air and a comforting bedside manner. I recounted the events of the past week, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep and the constant strain. As I spoke, I watched his face, searching for a flicker of doubt, a hint of disbelief. But Etienne listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, a heavy silence descended upon the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Charles," he said, "I understand how unsettling these experiences must be. However, I believe a more rational explanation is possible. Perhaps stress, overwork, or even a lingering illness might be causing these hallucinations." The word hung in the air, a slap in the face. Hallucinations? Was I truly losing my mind? The thought was terrifying, but a small part of me clung to it, a desperate hope that the nightmare could be explained away. Etienne spent the next few hours examining me thoroughly, poking and prodding, asking questions about my sleep patterns and diet. He found nothing physically wrong with me, which only served to deepen my unease. As the day wore on, the shadows in my house seemed to lengthen, the silence more oppressive than ever. That night, with Etienne staying as a guest in the spare room, I finally managed a few hours of fitful sleep. However, the respite was short-lived. I awoke with a gasp, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. The room was bathed in the pale moonlight, filtering through the window, casting long, skeletal shadows across the walls. And then I heard it, a faint, guttural whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a voice devoid of form or shape, yet filled with a chilling malice. The words were indistinct, but the intent was clear. A mockery, a threat. Fear choked me, stealing my breath. I reached out blindly, searching for Etienne, for any semblance of comfort. My hand grasped his arm, his touch a lifeline in the storm of terror. He stirred awake, mumbling incoherently, and I frantically explained what I'd heard. Etienne, ever the skeptic, dismissed it as a dream, a product of my overactive imagination. But his voice lacked its usual conviction, and a flicker of fear danced in his eyes. We lay awake for the rest of the night, the silence punctuated by my ragged breathing and the occasional creak of the old house settling. The following days were a blur of terror and despair. The whispers returned, more frequent, more insistent. They seemed to twist and turn, taking on new meanings with each iteration. Sometimes they were taunts, mocking my fear. Other times they were threats, promising a slow and agonizing demise. The unseen presence grew bolder, its influence more pervasive. Objects vanished and reappeared. Furniture rearranged itself as if by an unseen hand. The air itself crackled with an unnatural energy, sending shivers down my spine. One afternoon, as I sat huddled in my study, a book levitated from the shelf, flipping through its pages as if guided by an unseen hand. It landed open on a page filled with arcane symbols and cryptic diagrams. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a terrifying sense of connection, as if my mind was being invaded by the unseen entity. Panicked, I stumbled back from my desk, knocking over a chair. The book fluttered to the floor, its pages lying still. Yet the feeling of intrusion lingered, a cold dread that seeped into my bones. Etienne, witnessing the scene, could no longer deny the reality of my situation. His skepticism had been replaced by a deep concern, a dawning understanding of the horror that stalked me. We huddled together, our voices trembling as we discussed the entity, the Horla, as I had begun to call it. The name, a word I had stumbled upon in some forgotten text on the occult, seemed to fit the unseen presence perfectly, a creature of pure will and malice, existing beyond the bounds of the physical world. Etienne, despite his scientific background, was familiar with the fringes of human knowledge. He spoke of ancient myths and legends, tales of creatures that fed on human fear and despair. There were no easy answers. Etienne's words offered little comfort. We were adrift in a sea of the unknown, with a malevolent entity circling overhead. Sleep was a distant luxury, replaced by nights spent huddled together, fueled by a potent brew of strong coffee and growing desperation. One evening, as we sat hunched over Etienne's medical bag, sifting through archaic texts on forgotten remedies, a solution began to coalesce. Deep within a dusty grimoire, Etienne stumbled upon a passage detailing a ritual designed to banish or appease entities like the Horla. The ritual was complex, demanding rare ingredients and a precise execution. The passage spoke of herbs imbued with the strength of the sun and moon, of symbols etched with arcane power, and of a chalice filled with a concoction meant to attract the entity. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to break free from the Horla's grip. Obscured by the cloak of night, we ventured into the wilderness surrounding my house, searching for the specific herbs mentioned in the ritual. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth amplified my already heightened anxiety. After a frantic search, we returned with the necessary ingredients, exhausted and shaken. The following day, we transformed my study into a makeshift sanctuary, drawing intricate symbols on the walls with charcoal and chalk. In the center of the room, we placed the chalice, filled with the foul-smelling concoction brewed from the herbs. As the clock struck midnight, Etienne and I stood shoulder to shoulder in the center of the room, reciting the words from the grimoire in hushed voices. The air crackled with a tangible energy, the room growing colder with each passing moment. The silence was punctuated only by the strained cadence of our voices and the occasional gust of wind rattling the window panes. Just as we reached the climax of the ritual, the room plunged into an inky blackness. A wave of sheer terror washed over me. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, colliding with Etienne. Then a chilling voice filled the room. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, but a mind meld, a telepathic intrusion into my very thoughts. It spoke of hunger, of a thirst for despair. It spoke of a power beyond human comprehension, a being existing on a different plane of reality. It spoke of its amusement at our futile attempt to banish it. The voice mocked us, promised a swift and agonizing end. Panic threatened to consume me, but Etienne's hand, strong and firm, gripped my shoulder. He continued the chant, his voice unwavering despite the terror radiating from the entity. As the final words left his lips, a wave of energy surged through the room. The lights flickered back on, revealing a sight that sent a jolt of fear through me. The chalice, once filled, now lay empty, a faint wisp of smoke curling from its rim. The silence in the room was heavy with tension. Had it worked? Had we banished the Horla? We exchanged a look, hope battling fear in our eyes. The rest of the night passed in an excruciating silence. Each creak of the floorboard, each gust of wind sent shivers down my spine. Dawn finally arrived, painting the room a pale gold. With a tentative hand, I reached out and opened the window. A cool breeze filled the study, carrying the sweet scent of morning dew. The air no longer felt heavy with unseen presence. Had we truly succeeded? Was the Horla gone? A cautious optimism bloomed within me, but it was tinged with a shadow of doubt. The experience had left its mark, a deep scar on my sanity. I knew with a chilling certainty that even if the Horla was gone, its influence would linger. Etienne, his face drawn and wary, sat down heavily on a chair. "We may have won this battle, Charles," he said, his voice raspy, "but the war is far from over." His words, meant to comfort, sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through me. As the days turned into weeks, a fragile sense of normalcy began to return. The whispers ceased, the objects remained in their places. Yet a part of me remained vigilant, a constant prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The incident with the Horla changed me. It shattered my naive belief in a world governed by logic and reason. Now I knew with a chilling certainty that there were forces at play, unseen and terrifying, lurking on the fringes of our reality. Whether the Horla is truly gone or simply biding its time remains a question that haunts me to this day. I live with the constant knowledge that the darkness never truly sleeps, and that the whispers, though silent now, might return. Years passed, and the terror of the Horla receded into the background, a chilling memory I tried to bury deep within my psyche. My life settled into a semblance of normality, the routine I craved offering a fragile sense of security. One evening, however, as I sat hunched over my desk, a familiar prickling sensation crept up my neck. A shiver ran down my spine and a cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I dismissed it as a trick of the mind, a phantom memory. But then a book tumbled from the shelf behind me, its pages fluttering open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the page, a page filled with the same arcane symbols and cryptic diagrams I'd seen years ago. Panic clawed at me, but this time it was laced with a chilling realization. The Horla wasn't gone. It was simply waiting. As I reached for the fallen book, a faint, guttural whisper echoed through the room. A whisper that was different this time, tinged not just with malice, but with a hint of triumph. "Welcome back," it hissed. "We've been expecting you." The room plunged into darkness, the only sound my ragged gasps of breath. I knew in that terrifying moment that the battle with the Horla had just begun, and this time, I might not be so lucky.